The briefing room at Cold Fork Ranger Station smelled like burnt coffee and wet canvas that morning. And I remember thinking it was going to be a nothing day. Fire danger was moderate. We had 2 trail crews staged, a wildlife contractor coming in to swap collar batteries, and a maintenance team scheduled to redeck the footbridge at Mile 9. I had my clipboard. I had my second cup. I was already half listening. Then the door opened and Operations Chief Dale Renner walked in. And every conversation in that room stopped, like someone had pulled a plug. Renner had been with the Kettle River National Forest for 31 years. I had never once seen him move fast. He moved fast now. He went straight to the dispatch console, leaned over Marcy's shoulder, and said something I couldn't hear. Marcy's face changed. She keyed the all units channel and started reading names off a list, not incident names, personnel names. And after each one, she said the same phrase. Recall to station. Immediate. Do not stop to secure equipment. Do not stop to secure equipment. In 18 years, I had never heard those words. You always secure equipment. That's the whole job. I looked around the room. The younger Rangers looked confused, the way I felt. But the older ones, Renner, Marcy, Tom Petrakis, who'd been fighting fire since the Carter administration, the older ones had gone very still and very quiet, and not one of them looked surprised. Petrakis set his coffee down without drinking it and pushed it a few inches away, like he'd lost interest in the idea of drinking anything ever again. Chief, I said, what's the incident? Renner didn't answer me. He was on the radio to Air Ops. Redirect 402 and the contract ship. Do not overfly Sector 12. Route them the long way around the ridge if you have to. I don't care about fuel. Reroute them now. Redirect the helicopters. Away from a sector. On a moderate fire day, with no smoke report, no lightning, no lost hiker. I watched him walk to the big cork board where we keep the laminated sector maps, the ones we mark up in grease pencil during operations. He reached up and pulled down the Sector 12 map, just took it off the board, rolled it, and held it against his chest like it was something he didn't want anyone else to read over his shoulder. The room was silent. 20-some Rangers and support staff, and nobody said a word. Effective now, Renner said, and his voice was steady in the way a voice is steady when a man is working very hard to keep it that way. Sector 12 is closed. No patrols, no overflights, no maintenance. Anybody currently inside that boundary is being recalled as we speak. If you are assigned to 12 today, you are reassigned. Do not ask to what. You'll get it in writing. Somebody, one of the seasonal kids, Bautista, started to raise a hand. Nobody goes back into Sector 12. Renner said, until we know why it's happening again. Again. That one word landed in my chest and stayed there. Again. Whatever this was, it had happened before, and the people in this room who'd gone quiet had gone quiet because they remembered it. Nobody argued. Nobody asked the obvious questions. That was the thing that scared me more than the recall, more than the rerouted aircraft. In an outfit full of stubborn, opinionated, procedure-quoting public servants, nobody argued. Petrakis just nodded slowly, like a man confirming a diagnosis he'd been dreading. I want to be honest about something before I go any further, because I've spent a long time deciding whether to say any of this at all. I'm a senior ranger. 18 years. I've pulled bodies out of avalanche chutes and testified in federal timber theft cases and talked a man down off the Bitter Creek trestle at 2 in the morning. I trust evidence. I distrust feelings. That's not a personality. It's a survival trait in this line of work. Feelings get people killed in the backcountry. Evidence keeps you alive. So understand that everything I'm about to tell you, I documented. I have the reports. I have the logs. I kept copies I was not supposed to keep. And I've held on to them for a long time. And I'll tell you the thing I understand now that I didn't understand in that briefing room. Closing the sector was the easy part. Renner did it in about 90 seconds, and everyone obeyed. The hard part, the part that a whole generation of rangers before me apparently knew and never wrote down where I could find it, the hard part would have been reopening it. That's what this is about. That's what I need someone to know. Let me back up to where it actually started for me, which was 6 days earlier on the Tuesday, with a wildlife collar that wouldn't stop being wrong. We collar wolves and a handful of elk in the Kettle River unit under a joint study with the state and a university. The collars ping GPS every 4 hours and dump the fixes to a satellite. It's boring, reliable technology. The contractor, a soft-spoken woman named Priya Venkat, had been running the study for 6 years and could recite the failure modes in her sleep. Batteries die, collars slip, animals go into deep canyon and lose sky. Normal. What she brought me that Tuesday was not normal, and she knew it, which is why she came to me instead of just noting it in her monthly. She laid a printout on my desk. It was the track for a collared wolf, an adult female they'd tagged as F114. The track was clean and continuous for weeks, the animal ranging north and west along the Kettle drainage, exactly where you'd expect. Then at a certain point, the track just stopped transmitting. No slow battery decline, no last week ping. It went from 4-hour fixes to nothing, mid-stride. Collar died, I said. That's what I thought, Priya said. Except, she put down a second sheet. 3 other collars. 2 wolves, 1 elk. Different animals, different collars, different battery ages. All installed on different dates. Watch what they do. I watched. All 4 tracks did the same thing. They ran clean, and then they stopped. Not at the same time. But, and this is what she'd circled in red, at the same place, or close to it. All 4 collars had gone silent within about 1.5 miles of one another, along the eastern edge of the drainage. In Sector 12. Animals cluster, I said. Water, prey, whatever. Maybe there's a den or a kill site drawing them, and maybe there's a dead spot for the satellite in that canyon. There's no canyon there, she said. It's a bench. Open lodgepole, gentle grade. Best sky in the whole unit. And the animals don't cluster and then die. The collars die and the animals keep moving. She pulled out a 4th sheet, and this one raised the hair on my arms, though I didn't let it show. F114, the one I showed you first. Her collar went dark 3 weeks ago, but we had a remote camera on the Antler Creek game trail. And last Thursday, a wolf walked past it. I ran the coat pattern and the ear notch against her intake photos. She slid the camera still across the desk. It's her. She's alive. She's ranging normally. The collar's just off. And it's not the only one that came back. I looked at the camera still for a long time. A gray wolf, healthy, mid-trot, No collar visible in the frame, but Priya had circled the neck, and you could see it. The dark band of a collar that our satellites insisted had stopped existing 3 weeks ago. Could be the collar failed, and she rubbed it loose, but it's still hanging there, I said. Dead unit, still on the animal. Could be, Priya said. I'd like to go recover it and find out. It's in Sector 12. Can you get me an escort? I said yes. I want you to remember that I said yes, because I spent a long time afterward being glad she never went. That was Tuesday. I filed a note, classified it as an equipment anomaly, low priority, and moved on. 4 dead collars is a bad month, not a mystery. On its own, it meant nothing. The thing is, it wasn't on its own. Wednesday, the fire lookout at Steeple Rock stopped answering. We staffed 3 lookout towers in the kettle unit during fire season. Steeple Rock is the highest, a 1930s cab on a rock spine with a clean sight line down the whole eastern drainage over Sector 12, essentially. The lookout that summer was a returning seasonal named Gus Halloran. 60s, retired schoolteacher, meticulous. Gus checked in every morning at 0800 and every evening at 1800, and in between he called any smoke he saw, and you could set your watch by him. Wednesday morning, Gus missed his check-in. Marcy raised him 10 minutes later, and he came back sounding rattled, which wasn't like him. I pulled the dispatch recording afterward. I still have the transcript. Dispatch. Steeple Rock, Cold Fork, you missed your 0800. Everything all right up there? Steeple Rock, Cold Fork, Steeple. Sorry, my radio dropped out. Whole band went dead for about 20 minutes. Dispatch, copy. You have contact now? Steeple Rock, I've got you now, 5 by 5. It was strange though. I could see the patrol truck down on the bench road, saw it plain, and I was calling and calling, and nothing. Radio was just dead air. The second the truck went back up out of the low country, you all came right back. Dispatch. Which patrol was on the bench road? Steeple Rock. I don't know. Green service rig. I could read the door number through the glasses. It was 611. Marcy paused the traffic there and checked the board. I was standing next to her. Truck 611, hoofs, was not assigned to the bench road. Truck 611 was not assigned to anything that morning. It was sitting in the maintenance yard, 40 miles away, with a blown head gasket up on jack stands, its engine partly disassembled. I walked out to the yard myself and confirmed it. Same afternoon. Truck 611 had not moved in 9 days. So an experienced lookout, sober, careful, read a door number through good glass on a truck that was physically incapable of being where he saw it. On a road inside Sector 12. During a 20-minute window where his radio went dead and came back the instant the phantom truck left the low ground. I logged it as a probable misidentification and a separate radio propagation issue. 2 anomalies, 2 mundane explanations. That's the discipline. You don't braid coincidences into a story. You explain each thing on its own terms, and you keep the smallest explanation you can defend. I could defend those. Barely. Thursday broke the pattern I was using to stay calm. Because Thursday, the survey crew came out of the field early, and one of them, a young GIS tech named Alan Cho, would not stop shaking. We had a contract survey crew updating trail data, walking the trails with high-grade GPS units, logging every junction and switchback so the maps could be reissued. Routine, tedious work. Thursday, they were assigned the Eastern Trail Net, the part that runs the edge of Sector 12. They came in at noon, 4 hours early. The crew lead, a laconic ex-Army surveyor named Deb Marsh, filed the report, and I have it. It's dry. It's professional. It's one of the more frightening documents I own, precisely because of how professional it is. The report stated that at approximately 10:40, while walking the mapped bench trail, the crew reached a sign junction that does not appear on any Forest Service map in any edition, going back to the earliest we hold. A Carsonite post, a standard rooted wooden sign of the type the Forest Service used in the 1960s and 70s, weathered but legible. It read, Bear Hollow Loop, 2.5. Below it, an arrow pointing east, into country the map showed as trailless timber. Deb Marsh had walked these trails for the contract for 2 months. There had never been a junction there. She photographed it. The photograph is in the report. It is a real sign, real hardware, set in real ground, casting a real shadow. The GPS unit logged the point. And when she looked up the point back at the truck against the master trail layer, there was nothing there. No trail, no junction, no Bear Hollow, anything, anywhere in the unit's entire history. The part that sent Alan Cho home shaking was in Deb's report too, stated as flatly as everything else. They decided to walk the loop. Half a mile in, the mapped trail behind them, the bench trail, the one they'd come in on, the one that's been on the map for 80 years, was gone. Not overgrown, not obscured. Gone, replaced by unbroken timber, as though it had never been cut. They stood on a trail that didn't exist and looked back down the trail that did. And the real one had been unmade behind them. Deb Marsh, to her enormous credit, did the only correct thing. She marked a bearing on her compass, the old analog kind, the kind that doesn't care what the world thinks is real, and walked a hard, straight line west, off trail, until the crew hit the bench road. Then they followed the road out. She wrote in the report that she did not trust any trail, mapped or unmapped, and would not until someone explained to her what had happened. She recommended the Eastern Trail Net be closed to survey pending review. I read that report 3 times. Then I did something I want to be honest about. I walked it down the hall to my district ranger, Ellen Sotomayor, and I laid it on her desk along with the collar printouts and the Steeple Rock transcript, and I said, I've got 3 separate incidents in 3 days, all inside Sector 12, and I can't reconcile them, and I don't like the shape they make. Ellen read for a while. She's a careful reader. And I watched something happen to her face that I'd watched happen to Petrakis in the briefing room a week later, a stillness, a kind of recognition. She squared the papers and she said, Leave these with me. Don't file the survey report in the shared system yet. Bring me anything else that touches 12 directly to me. Not into dispatch's log. To me. Ellen, I said, what is this? And she said the thing that turned my 3 days of coincidences into something I couldn't put down. She said, How long have you been in this unit? 18 years? I said yes. She said, Then this is your first one. Lucky you. And she wouldn't say another word. Your first one. I went home that night, and I couldn't sleep. So I did what I always do when I can't sleep, which is work. I have access to the unit's historical records, not everything. The deep archive is at the regional office, but the local record room at Cold Fork goes back to the station's construction in 1951. Filing cabinets of onion skin patrol reports and hand-drawn maps and maintenance ledgers nobody had opened in decades. I let myself into the record room after hours, and I started looking for the phrase that wouldn't leave me alone. Bear Hollow. It took me 2 hours. I found it in a maintenance ledger from 1987. The ledger was a standard-bound green book, the kind maintenance foreman kept before everything went digital. Columns for date, location, work performed, materials, crew, sign-off. Ordinary entries, hundreds of them. Culvert cleaned, sign replaced, water bar rebuilt. And then, on a page in the summer of 1987, in a different hand from the surrounding entries, a work order I read maybe 15 times. Location: Bear Hollow Loop Junction, East Bench. Work performed. Sign removed and destroyed per directive. Post pulled, hole filled and disguised. Trail obscured with slash and duff, 0.5 miles east. Crew, initials. And in the sign-off column, not a foreman's initials, but a full name in careful block capitals. D. Renner. Dale Renner, my operations chief. In 1987, he'd have been a young maintenance hand, and he had personally removed a sign for a trail that, according to every map we owned, had never existed, and destroyed it, and hidden the post hole, and buried the trail under slash, per a directive I couldn't find. The trail Deb Marsh's crew had walked into on Thursday, removed and destroyed in 1987, 30-some years ago. And there it was again this week, sign and hardware and all, weathered like it had stood there the whole time. I photographed the ledger page. I did not put it back exactly where I found it. And I want to tell you that finding it made things clearer. But it didn't. It made them worse, because now I had a mundane explanation for the sign someone had put an old sign back up as a prank or a marker, but no mundane explanation for the trail unmaking itself behind a professional survey crew, and no explanation at all for how a sign removed and destroyed in 1987 was standing weathered and rooted in 2000's ground. The next morning, I asked Renner about it. I didn't show him the photo. I just said, casually, over coffee, that the survey crew had found an old sign out on the east bench, something about a Bear Hollow loop. And did he know anything about an old trail out there? I have known a lot of men who could lie well. Renner is not one of them. He went still that stillness again. The whole station seemed to run on it that week, and he said, "There's no trail on the east bench." And then, before I could say anything, he added, "You want to stay off the east bench." And he took his coffee and left. He didn't ask who was on the survey crew. He didn't ask to see the sign. He didn't express any of the curiosity a normal operations chief expresses when told there's unmapped infrastructure in his unit. He already knew there was a Bear Hollow loop. He'd buried it himself. And his only reaction to hearing it was to warn me away. That was Friday. Over the weekend, 2 more things happened, and I'll take them in the order they hit my desk. The first was the maintenance discrepancy. On Saturday, I pulled the maintenance work logs for the whole unit for the season, because I'd started to think of the 1987 ledger. and I wanted to see whether anyone was still doing work out toward the east bench. What I found was a standing entry that appeared every month, all season, going back as far as the digital logs went. And when I checked the paper ledgers every season for decades, a monthly line item: bench road clear and maintained to gate 12. Crew hours logged, fuel drawn, sign-offs collected. Except there is no gate 12. The bench road, on every map, ends at a turnaround 2 miles short of the sector boundary. There is no gate. I drove out that afternoon to the edge of 12. Not into it, I want to be clear. I stayed on the mapped road, and I drove to where the road officially ends. And the turnaround was there, cracked asphalt and a rotting log barrier. And past it, the road kept going, graded, brushed back, recently maintained, vanishing east into the timber, toward the bench, toward the sector we did not map past. Someone had been maintaining a road, monthly, for decades, that ends at a gate that doesn't exist, leading into a place we don't survey. And they'd been drawing real fuel and logging real hours to do it, in plain sight, in the official system, forever. I sat in the truck at the log barrier for a long time. I did not drive past it. I have thought about that decision more than any other decision in my life. The second thing that happened that weekend was that I called a retired ranger. His name was Warren Teague. He'd been the district ranger at Cold Fork before Ellen. Before the ranger, before Ellen, he'd run the unit in the 80s and 90s, and he was the man who'd have signed the directive Renner obeyed in 1987. He was in his late 80s now, in an assisted living place in Spokane, sharp as a tack by all accounts. I'd met him twice at retirement functions. I called and said I was doing some historical research on the old trail system and could I drive out. He was quiet on the phone for a moment, and then he said, "Which trail?" in a voice that already knew, and I said, "Bear Hollow." And he said, "Come Sunday, come alone, and bring whatever you found, because I'm not going to be the one to say it first." I drove to Spokane Sunday. Warren Teague was a small, straight-backed man with a cane and eyes that hadn't dimmed. I laid out everything, the collars, Steeple Rock, the survey crew, the 1987 ledger with Renner's name, the phantom gate, the maintained road. He looked at each item without surprise, the way a doctor looks at symptoms he's seen before. And when I was done, he sat back and was quiet for a while. And then he told me the thing I'd driven 200 miles to hear and immediately wished I hadn't. "It runs on a clock," he said. "That's the part nobody figures out until they've been through more than one. It's not random. It comes back on a schedule. About every 18 years, it starts up again. The collars, the radios, the trails that aren't there, the things people see in the low country. It builds over a week or two. And every time, the answer is the same. You close the sector, you wait, you let it go quiet, and then you can open it again. And it behaves for another 18 years. 18 years. The same number as my career. Your first one, Ellen had said. "What is it?" I said. "I don't know," Teague said, and I believed him. "I ran this unit for 20 years, and I closed 12 twice, and I never once knew what it was. Nobody I inherited it from knew either. That's not the secret. The secret isn't what it is. The secret is that we manage it. There's a procedure. There's been a procedure since before my time. You don't fight it, and you don't explain it. and you don't tell the public, because there's nothing to tell them except stay out. And stay out is exactly what a closure says. You want to know the worst thing I ever learned in 40 years of federal service? He leaned forward on the cane. The Forest Service has been quietly managing this since 1951, maybe before. And the whole apparatus for managing it fits in one sentence. And I've been carrying that sentence around for 50 years. And I've never said it out loud to anyone who hadn't already earned it. Say it, I said. But he shook his head. Not yet. You haven't found the archive yet. When you find the archive, you'll understand the sentence, and not before. Go home. It'll close by the end of the week. Renner will pull the plug the second the pattern's undeniable. He always does. He's good at it. When it's closed, and only when it's closed, you go find the archive. It's not at Cold Fork. It's at the regional office, in the closed incident vault. And it's not filed under 12. He wrote something on a scrap of paper and folded it and put it in my hand and closed my fingers over it. It's filed under that. Don't open it here. Don't open it in the car. Open it when you're ready to spend the rest of your life knowing. I put the paper in my breast pocket. I didn't look at it in the car. I want you to understand the kind of pull that took, because I'm not a superstitious man. And I had a scrap of paper in my pocket that I believed contained the key to everything. And I drove 200 miles home without unfolding it, because an 88-year-old man had asked me not to. And because I was, I think, afraid of him being right. The closure came Thursday morning. The briefing room, the recall, the rerouted helicopters. Renner rolling up the map against his chest. Again. By then I understood the word. What I didn't understand was everything else. The days between Teague and the closure had stacked up more evidence, and I logged all of it, because logging was the only thing keeping me steady. 2 more collars went dark in 12. The Steeple Rock lookout, Gus, reported a second radio blackout, and this time he saw people on the Bench Road figures, he said, walking in a line along the maintained road toward the Phantom Gate. A work crew, looked like, old-fashioned, and they didn't answer the horn. Then a search and rescue call-out Wednesday night for a pair of overdue backpackers turned into the incident that finally made Renner move. And it's the one I think about most, so I'll tell it carefully. 2 backpackers, a couple in their 30s, permitted for a 3-night loop that clipped the edge of 12. They didn't check out. We launched a hasty search. We had their InReach track the little satellite beacon that pings a position, and we had our helicopter with a good camera. And the 2 data sets could not be made to agree. The InReach track showed them hiking the permitted loop, and then, on the second evening, turning off the map trail onto a spur heading east, into 12. Along a line that corresponded, I checked. I overlaid it myself to the Bear Hollow loop from the 1987 Ledger. The track went out the Bear Hollow loop for 2.5 miles to a point and stopped. Not a low battery stop, a clean stop, mid-stride, exactly like the collars. The helicopter flew that line. The camera footage shows unbroken timber. No trail, no spur, no backpackers, no clearing, no Bear Hollow anything. The InReach said they walked a trail. The camera said the trail was not there. Both instruments were working perfectly. I have both files. I have watched the helicopter footage more times than is healthy, following the GPS overlay as it tracks across the screen, along a route through the trees, where the trees are simply continuous, closed, old, and there is nowhere for two people to have walked. We never found them. The case is officially open, classified as lost and presumed. One of thousands of people who go into the national forests every year and don't come out. And statistically, it means nothing. 2 more names on a long, sad list. But I had watched that GPS track walk them onto a trail that Dale Renner destroyed in 1987. And I had watched a helicopter prove the trail wasn't there. And Thursday morning, Renner shut down the sector. And I understood that the 2 backpackers were the reason, and that closing the sector was not going to bring them back, and that Renner knew it wouldn't, and did it anyway, because that was the procedure, and the procedure was all anyone had. That's when I decided to find the archive. Not out of duty, out of the pull of the folded paper in my pocket, which I finally opened Thursday night at my kitchen table, alone, ready. I told myself to spend the rest of my life knowing. Warren Teague had written a single word and a filing designation. The word was hollow. The designation was a regional closed incident file number, and beside it, in his careful old hand, not under 12, never under 12. That's the trick. Look for the place, not the number. Look for the place, not the number. I didn't understand it yet. I would. Getting into the regional closed incident vault took me 3 weeks and a favor from an old academy classmate who'd moved up to regional records and who owed me for a thing I won't go into. I told her I was researching historical closure precedents for a management plan, which was true in the way that the worst lies are true. She pulled the file designation Teague had given me and left it on a reading table in the vault and told me I had until she locked up. The file was a banker's box. On the end, in faded marker, hollow closed incidents, no sector number. And when I opened it, I understood the trick. And I understood Teague's sentence before I even found it written down, because it was self-evident once you saw the shape of the box. Inside were closure files. Not 1, not 2. 9 of them, the oldest from 1951. The newest, I would eventually realize, being written that very season by us. And each closure file described the identical pattern. Wildlife instruments failing at a bench in the eastern drainage. Lookouts losing radio contact when patrols entered the low country. Survey crews reporting trails that weren't on the maps and mapped trails vanishing behind them. Maintenance crews servicing infrastructure that officially didn't exist. Search tracks that couldn't be reconciled with aerial imagery. People walking east on a trail called Bear Hollow and not coming back. The same pattern, 9 times, roughly every 18 years. 1951, 1969, 1987, and so on down the decades, each cluster building over a week or two, each ending in a quiet closure of a few weeks, each closure explained to the public with a different lie. I pulled the public-facing notices, which were clipped to each file. Wildfire rehabilitation, 1951. Storm damage assessment, 1969. Habitat restoration, 1987. Bridge repairs. Root disease survey. Prescribed burn recovery. 9 closures, 9 different reasons, every one of them false, every one of them the same event. And here is the thing that made me sit down hard in that vault. The trick, Teague's trick, the reason the file wasn't under 12 And the reason no one working today had ever connected these, the sector had a different number every time. In 1951, the affected sector was numbered 4. In 1969, it was Sector 31. In 1987, when Renner buried the sign, it was Sector 7. Different administrative reorganizations, different map additions, different numbering schemes across 70 years, and every single time the sector was renumbered before it was reopened. The same ground, the same bench, the same road, the same bare hollow. 9 different numbers over 7 decades, so that no ranger inheriting the unit would ever look at a current closure and recognize it as the 9th iteration of the same thing, because there was no continuous number to follow. The institutional memory had been deliberately, patiently severed at the joint of the number over and over for 70 years. At the bottom of the box was the oldest document, a maintenance directive dated 1951. Typed on a manual machine, the letters uneven, signed by a forest supervisor whose name meant nothing to me. It was a single operational instruction, and it was Teague's sentence, and I read it and felt the whole thing close over my head like water. Rename the sector before reopening it. Personnel remember numbers longer than places. That was the procedure. That was the whole apparatus. Not a containment field, not a scientific program, not a cover story with substance behind it. Just a filing habit. Just the quiet institutional knowledge that if you change the number every time, no one will ever add it up. And the thing at Bear Hollow can go on doing whatever it does on its 18-year clock. And the Forest Service can go on closing the sector for a few weeks and reopening it under a fresh number and telling the public a small, different lie forever, without ever having to know what it is. Because knowing was never the job. Managing it was the job. And the way you manage a thing you can't explain and can't fix and can't publicize is you make sure no one after you can ever see the pattern. And the cheapest way to do that is to change what you call it. I did not photograph the box. I want to be honest about that failure of nerve. I read every file. I read them twice. And when my classmate came to lock up, I put the lid back on and walked out into the parking lot and sat in my truck and did not drive for an hour. I told myself I'd come back with a camera. I never did. By the time I'd worked up the nerve, the file had been moved, and my classmate had transferred. And the new records officer had no idea what I was talking about. And I understood that this, too, was part of the procedure. That boxes like that move quietly and often. That the whole thing survives precisely because no one ever quite manages to nail it down before the will to nail it down leaks away. Sector 12 reopened 5 weeks after Renner closed it. There was a public notice. Forest restoration project successfully completed. Trails reopened. Permits reissued. And when the new map edition came out the following spring, I noticed because I was looking now, because I would always be looking now, that the eastern drainage had been quietly renumbered in a routine administrative harmonization. Sector 12 was gone. The ground was there. The bench was there. The bench road still ran to its official turnaround. And I have no doubt whatever still ran past it to a gate that isn't on the map. But it wasn't Sector 12 anymore. It was Sector 26. Personnel remember numbers longer than places. Renner retired 2 years later. Ellen moved to a regional job. Gus didn't come back the next season. I stayed. I stayed 18 more years, which is its own kind of confession. And I kept my copies, and I did my job. And I never once patrolled past the log barrier on the bench road. And when younger rangers brought me anomalies out of the eastern drainage, a collar, a radio dropout, a survey crew that came in rattled, I did what had been done to me. I told them to stay off the east bench. I told them it was probably nothing. I renumbered it in their minds before they could ever count. God forgive me, I became the procedure. I retired last spring. And 3 weeks ago, a plain padded envelope arrived at my house with no return address. Inside was a single folded map, a current operations map of the Kettle River unit, freshly printed, the kind that only exists internally. I found the eastern drainage. Sector 26 was gone. It had been renumbered again, ahead of schedule, years early, which has never once happened in 70 years of files. The clock is not supposed to run early. It has always been 18 years. Paperclipped to the map was a photocopy of the 1951 directive, the one from the bottom of the box. Rename the sector before reopening it. And under it, in fresh ink, in a hand I didn't recognize, someone had written, "It's asking for its number back. We're running out of new ones. You counted the closures. You're the only one still alive who counted. Come to Cold Fork." And I understand now what Warren Teague meant about spending the rest of your life knowing. And what he could not say out loud until I'd earned it. And it isn't the sentence about the numbers. That's just the lock. The thing the lock was keeping shut is this. Every 18 years, for 70 years, we'd change the name. So we would forget. And it worked. And we forgot, but something out there on that bench has been keeping perfect count the whole time, under every number we ever gave it. And it has finally finished waiting for one of us to learn to count too. And the reason the map came to my house, the reason the clock ran early, the reason a hand I don't recognize is inviting an old retired man back to a station he swore he'd left, is that the sector doesn't want to be renamed anymore. It wants to be remembered by name. By the one person left who knows it has one. And I'm afraid, sitting here writing this so that at least it will exist somewhere outside my own head, that the only reason any of us was ever allowed to reopen that ground at all was that, sooner or later, it always intended to close it around one of us for good. I hope you like it. If you then please don't forget to hit a like and smash that subscribe button for next story. And take a comment along. Where are you from and what time it is to your location?